Hello, everyone. I'm Jan Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We are an ecosystem of brands for women, by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and brands that champion equity for women professionally and personally. Today, you're here with us watching our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion show brought to you each and every Tuesday. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Join Mayshad, and also check us out at joinmayshad.com, where you can learn more about our upcoming programming and content. Here with us today is Jennefer Witter, the CEO of the Borderline Group, an award-winning corporate communications and public relations agency. Jennefer, I would love for us to catch up. It's been a while since we've had you on stage, and all things related to the new world of which digital is. Talk to us a bit about how your work has really changed during COVID and during 2020.
Well, you know what? My work itself really hasn't changed in the fact that my company, which is 18 years old, we've always been a virtual office, and I work with independent contractors who work from their homes. How my world has changed has been impacted by how my clients' world has changed because they all worked in offices. And so they had to make the change from being in their physical location and moving into their homes and all the related work that was required for that, like getting the laptops, getting the Wi-Fi, renegotiating with their landlord. We moved ahead as we always have. And, back in the day when we started, people would say, well, where's your office? And I would say, I have a home office. It's like admitting something that, you had something in your closet, a skeleton that you wanted to keep in there. And now home offices are the rage. So we really were ahead of the curve. What I will say is that with the business, we did lose accounts. I am not going to lie about it, but we had the flexibility to move forward. And with the Borland Group, as I always say, I'm the wearer of many hats. Under the Borland Group, there's the public relations agency, which you discussed. We do corporate communications with a specialization in minority-owned and women-led businesses, as well as nonprofits. But we also have a speaker end. And I'm highly engaged as a public speaker to various organizations, ranging from the Durst Corporation to Bell Brands. I've spoken at the Pentagon. And I speak on generally business topics, but I also speak on implicit bias. And this past year, obviously, implicit bias has been my most requested speaker topic for the entire year. So we were able to balance off the loss of the clients, the PRN, with the substantial increase in speaking engagements on implicit bias.
Thank you, Jennefer. And that's exactly what we're here to talk today about is implicit bias. I want to start the conversation by level setting some terminology that many of us are hearing used frequently now. And I want to make sure that we're all understanding terms in the way that we should be understanding them, which I think then leads us to a more fruitful, fulfilling conversation. We hear words and phrases such as implicit bias, unconscious bias, unearned privilege. Help us to understand, the ways in which those are all very similar, but yet are there any differences across how we think about those phrases?
It's very interesting that you bring up that question because implicit bias, unconscious bias, and hidden bias are all the same terms. There is no difference. So if I say implicit bias, it's the same as unconscious bias. And if you say hidden bias, it's the same as implicit bias. There is no difference. And the meaning for all terms is very clear. Whether you say hidden bias or unconscious bias, the meaning is that it is a prejudice of which we are unaware. So regardless of the term that you use, the definition remains the same.
And Jennefer, the fact of the matter of that, in the essence of it being unaware of it, is that a part of our own socialization processes? Let's talk about the way in which biases are actually formed. And you and I have had conversations around, not knowing what you don't know, right? And so if we're here to really truly overcome implicit bias, I think we have to understand and start to peel back layers in the sense of really, how does this originate?
I totally agree. And with most studies, and everything I say here is fact and evidence-based. And most studies have said that implicit bias starts when we are as young as 3 all the way to the age of 5. We're literally babies. And the first two biases that we focus in on are race and gender. And then as we get older, it's like an onion. We keep adding on layers, and it grows out to other biases such as weight, sexuality, skin tone. And we are influenced by these factors that we are not even aware of. And those factors include our family, our religion, even where we grow up. So we keep piling it on. So it starts off with race and gender, and then it blossoms into these other implicit biases that we get solidified or calcified simply by those who are around and where we are.
It's interesting at Mayshad, we talk a lot about identity and the complexity of identity. And we talk about the ways in which the roles that we play in the lives that we live are sometimes very externally visible, right? And then there are other ways in which you don't often understand or know what someone's experienced or, where they may be from originally, or just all those other life-shaping moments. Yeah. Talk to us a bit about the work that you do with clients in the sense of kind of teasing out what truly is identity and the ways in which simultaneously we could be privileged and in the ways in which we could be oppressed.
Well, the thing about that is I really don't go into those areas because with implicit bias, what we need to do is to recognize it. If we don't know that we have it, then how are we going to combat it? And then once we realize that we have it and then we want to combat it, is how do you go about it? So what I talk about is how do you recognize it? And then what are the steps you take to overcome it? Because keep in mind, implicit bias is baked into our DNA. It is as natural to us as waking up in the morning and brushing our teeth. We just don't think about those two things. So when you see a person, let's say, who's in a wheelchair, you may think to yourself, oh, that poor person. There is an element of condescension to that person. But do we look at that person as an individual? Do we look at the wheelchair as an impediment? What we should be doing is looking at the wheelchair as a mobility device for that individual. And for the person in the wheelchair, they may be perfectly healthy. They just may not be able to walk. And that person has the same wants, needs, and desires as everybody else. But they have to fight the implicit bias that they are different. I mentioned to you about a friend of mine who is wheelchair bound. She has been since the since she was born. And she's a very attractive woman. And, she's a sex expert. She is a model, and she has a PhD. But when people see her, they will think that she's a motivational speaker, like she has to be doing this wonderful work, and there's nothing wrong about being a motivational speaker, but she's none of those things. And with the sex expert, she wants to have sex just like everybody else, and she even applied to be on the Bachelor, so it's like all these things that we have to take a step back. Because it truly is a mindset change that it takes a long time for us. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not a quick fix, but it's a way for us to turn things around. Because remember, every one of us is biased. Jan, you're biased. I am biased. But how many of us think that we have been a victim of unconscious bias? And then when you turn it around and you get that personal element to it, I think that your mind opens up a little bit more.
Jennefer, it's so fascinating to hear you explain this, because I also think that sometimes, particularly for those of us who are executives who lead teams, lead companies, we know how to spot unconscious bias in others, right? Because that's often part of what being a really effective leader means. And yet sometimes we don't take a step back to actually understand the ways in which we hold biases ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. In the sense of the opinions and assumptions that we make about other people. And that shapes everything then, from how we hire to people we want to have as a part of our company or on our teams, to our social circles, to the way in which we just envision the world.
Absolutely. And there are so many things to unpack in your statement there. I mean, take a step back for all of those who are listening to this. How many people have you worked with who were visibly disabled, who were in a wheelchair, or who were blind, or who were even deaf. I can tell you, I've been working since 1982 in New York City, and I have never worked with anyone who is confined in a wheelchair. But in order to get through the door, in order to work, you have to get through the door. And there were so many triggers to implicit bias. For example, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, if you have a Black sounding name like Rashida or Marcus, you have to send out 15 resumes to get one response back. But if you have a white sounding name like Jennefer, Jan, David, okay, you send out 10 resumes and you get one response back. So for people with Black sounding names, they have to work harder to overcome the trigger that is the name. And it's not just that, not just the name. According to Skidmore College, when the HR is looking over resumes, it's been found that HR executives lean toward men and pick out those resumes because the feeling is, get this, that women are less competent than men. So when you think about race and gender in the workplace, there is a plethora of other things that can hold us back. And if you bear with me, there is this one story that I wanted to share with you. And it's a friend of mine. I'm able to give you her full name because she was in Fortune magazine. And her birth name is Erin. And she was sending out all these resumes to Silicon Valley companies. And as Fast Company once said, Silicon Valley is a cesspool of sexism. And we've seen that over the past few years. But she wasn't getting any responses back. And so a friend of hers said, change your name. And so what she did was, her last name is Clevy. So she changed her name, Erin, to Mack, M-A-C-K, which was the first four letters of her last name. She sent the same resume out. All right. And all she did was change her first name. She didn't change her job. She didn't change her school. She didn't change her experience. And do you know what happened? From getting zero response back under Erin McClevey, she got a response rate of 70%
Wow.
as Mac McClevey, because the HR people thought she was a man.
So Jennefer, so many questions just in response to that, because I'm wondering, so this is, when we often think about the ways in which, we lack equality in the United States, we also often think about us versus them, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's men versus women, it's straight versus gay, it's Black versus white. We often don't also think about the ways, for example, in which women punish each other by not being more consciously aware of unconscious bias, or supporting women in a way where maybe we should think through a different lens. Let's dissect that for a bit.
Yes, that too, because, women are not sitting by the sidelines. Yale University did a study with male and female scientists. Now, remember, these are scientists who are trained to be neutral. And out of this survey of male and female scientists, they said that they were more inclined to hire men over women because they felt the women were less competent. They were also willing to give the men $4,000 more than women, even if they were equally trained. So women unconsciously participate in the process as well. And it's not only holding ourselves back, but if we don't have a fulsome array of individuals, males, females, African Americans, little people, this is what we lose. We lose the opportunity to have a diversity of thought that can inform opinions and decisions that will enrich the outcome of the companies for which they work. We've lost a great deal because of this.
Mm-hmm. Jennefer, do you feel like because of what's happening in our country, politically, socially, economically, right now in 2020, that companies are finally moving to a different sort of world where they're no longer just checking things off of a box because they know that they need to have a diversity initiative or an employee resource group program or whatever all of those other sort of corporate social responsibilities activities were in the past? Do you feel like there's more heartfelt, genuine transparency and openness to how new programs can be designed and created and implemented for companies to actually make significant headway in the ways in which we're still lacking?
We'll see. You know, I'm not a spring chicken. I've been working for 35 plus years. I've seen hope in the past, and we'll see if people will walk the talk, whether or not it will fizzle out in 2 or 3 years. I am happy to see the focus. A focus is better than no focus. But this is a nuanced and complex topic.
Mm-hmm.
You can say you have diversity, but do you have inclusion? And a friend of mine once described it, making it very simple. Diversity is being asked to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So if you bring all these different people into the workplace, if they are not feeling welcomed, if they're not feeling heard, if they're not feeling like they're part of the environment, they're going to leave. And let's not forget that those who are there, let's just say there is the white employees, they have to understand that those who are being brought in, it's not a form of affirmative action. It is not checking off the box. What is happening is that we're broadening the pool to allow, again, a greater resource to come in. They're not being hired as a favor to their mother. They're being hired because they're the best candidate for the job. But if the white employees don't see it like this, and they see that their positions may be threatened, there is going to be conflict. So we just can't say we're going to train about implicit bias, what it is. We just can't say that we're a diverse company. You know, those companies that put up the black squares and took Juneteenth off, well, applause, applause, applause. That's really nice. But what are you really doing? What long-term change are you making? And is it from the top down? Is there a commitment? One of the things I read about is that chief diversity officers, which you think would be in great demand, and they are, there's a churn going on because they're there offering their plans and their programs and they're not being implemented. So we have taken steps forward, but are they going to continue? We'll see. Are they going to stick? Perhaps. Let's talk about this in 2025. And that way we'll have more data to show whether or not this is a brush fire of a movement or it's a long-term commitment.
I think there's also a lot of changes just happening within the demographics of the United States as well. Mm-hmm. We have women set to inherit $72 trillion of wealth in the next 20 to 30 years. We know that diversity is good for business. I mean, we always knew that, right? But now we have the data to actually prove that diversity and inclusion is really good for the bottom line of a corporate entity. We know that ESG funds, socially responsible investing funds, outperform the S&P 500, and that's happened for quite a while now as well. And we have, the fact that in a very short period of time, white people would be in the minority in the United States as well, in the sense of, just embracing the changing demographics and changing population of the landscape of the U.S. Do you think that those factors also present a unique moment in time, or do you get the sense that there'll be some continued resistance? Because you're right, in the sense of, I absolutely also agree that, wanting to invite more people to dance and shaking up your dance partners means feeling really comfortable with who you are as a person and feeling that you also have a trusted space and trusted spot to be able to live to your own fullest potential, while you're bringing along everyone else for the dance.
Well, here's the thing. As you said, it's been long known that diversity adds to the bottom line, the benefits of it. So why did we need the murder of Mr. Floyd in order for companies to take this on? Why? So the hard empirical data was already there. Why was it not being used? And the United States, by 2045, if I recall correctly, is going to become a majority minority country where whites are the minority. Whites have the power. That's just the way it is right now. Okay. And they're going to hold on to that power as long as they have. Whoever's in power is going to hold on to it because they don't want to let it go. And who wants to feel powerless? So they're going to hang on, I'm speaking in broad brush statements now, to the power they have because they don't want to release it to the next group. But here's the thing. If we don't accept the fact that we are changing demographically, Hispanics are going to be the largest majority minority, Black Americans, Asian Americans, we are here. We are not going to go away. And if you don't start pulling us into the ranks and taking advantage of the diverse talent, your company is going to suffer from it. So if you don't want to look at it from the altruistic level, then look at it from the financial level. Do you want long-term profitability for your company where it can maintain its standing? You can get your power there. But if you don't, then you're going to be left behind. I mean, when the automobile came along, there were still some people with their horse and buggies. They weren't going to let go. The horse is no longer here. Get in the car and drive.
Jennefer, let's talk about the theme of allies. And when we have these conversations within the Mayshad community, we talk about a wide range of emotions and thoughts and feelings that are coming up for people during this time, from, guilt and wanting to make change happen, but also wanting it to do it in a way where it's very honest and transparent and long lasting, and moving away from the checking things off of a box, what we were talking about earlier. What is your advice for people that do hold a spot of unearned privilege when it comes to race, to be able to step up and stand up and make a difference right now?
Well, I think with supportership, that the fact that they're even thinking of this is a step forward. And if they really want to make a change, they need to make a change within themselves and to educate themselves. I can tell you as a woman of color that after Mr. Floyd was murdered, how many people came to me first to apologize or to say what wrongs they righted, or I didn't know that this was happening. And the first thing is that when someone says something, listen and let it known to be true. Because with Mr. Floyd, with Ms. Taylor, with all of them, we in the Black community knew this was happening. It was not a surprise to us. And we talked about it not for years, but for decades. And all of a sudden, people are now seeing it. So listen to what we have to say and put value against our words. You also can't expect every Black to be your educator. It's one of me and many of you. And as somebody wrote on his Facebook page, I won't say who it is, but he's a reporter with a major outlet. He goes, I am not the president of Black people. He was just like, I can't speak for 12 million people. And I remember a friend of mine, and this was years ago, back in the 80s, she was working on Wall Street, a woman of color, and she goes, I feel like I have the Black race on my back. Because everything that we were doing, again, right up to today, and I started working in the early 80s, I'm usually the only Black executive in the room, or I'm the only Black woman executive in the room. And the stereotypes and the expectations is exhausting. So what I want people to do is educate themselves. And there's plenty of material out there. And you could read How to Be an Anti-Racist. You can read these books, but I like to do something different. And that is read like novels and articles or autobiographies that tell the story, because How to Be an Anti-Racist will give you some tools. But I feel that when you put flesh and blood behind this, it makes it much more real. For example, one of my favorite books of all times is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And I don't know if you had a chance to read it, and I would advise everybody to read that book. It's an award-winning book. And Ms. Wilkerson writes about, I believe, 3 families who left the South as part of the Great Migration and went to Chicago. And one of the men left Florida because he heard he was going to be lynched and he needed to get the hell out of Dodge. And he became a railway porter, a pullman. And that was considered a high-end job for Black Americans. But this story just tells you of their struggles just to live day to day. And we're not talking about 1845. We're talking about the 1900s, 1950s, 60s. So when you read these kinds of stories, it opens up your mind to the struggles of others. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a Black American story. It's like I brought my prop here. And one of the books I have here is Eating Chinese Food Naked, okay? And it's a wonderful book about this young woman who went to Columbia University, and she moves back home to Queens with her Chinese immigrant parents. She's first generation. So reading those books, going out of your way. I mean, how many people here in New York or white have gone to the Schomburg Center, or going to well, when we can, the Chinese boat races in Queens. When I spoke at TEDx last year, it was in Albany, and it was at the beginning of December. And the audience was about 100 people, primarily white. And I was saying to them, how many here know about Kwanzaa? And everybody raised their hands. Kwanzaa is the African-American celebration of the holidays. That's it in a nutshell. And there's a lot of festivities and celebrations. And I said, well, how many people here are going to go? And not one white person raised their hand. And I said, why not? He said, you'll be welcomed. You're not going to be slapped in the face and tossed out in the street. But by getting yourself involved in these worlds, by educating yourself, by reading these books, by questioning these stereotypes, you can do it. And you don't need to rely on one Black person to do it, or one Asian, whatever.
Jennefer, you talk a lot about also creating your own story and the importance of the personal narrative. And at Mayshad, we talk a lot about how, each of us who's a part of the community is a wonderful sum of all of our past parts. Yeah. And I think that this is especially very important for women, because as we pivot and reinvent in our careers, we often forget about what came before, because we just want to be known and identified as what we are today. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit about the importance of the personal narrative and how has that shaped your own career?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important because our personal narratives, I think, are fascinating. How did we arrive there? You're from Nebraska, I'm from the South Bronx, and here we are under the same sky. And I think that by creating our narratives, because when I say I'm from the South Bronx, automatically there is an implicit bias. Implicit bias happens within 5 to 10 seconds. Just as, hearing that you're from Nebraska, there's that 5 to 10 seconds where you just, create ideas. And I think that with our narratives, obviously, they break the stereotypes. Yes, I grew up in the South Bronx. Yes, I come from a working class family. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old. And my mother made sure to take us to church in our neighborhood. And we went there every Sunday. And, from that church, and everybody was Black in that church. And they all were working class. Many of them were immigrants, and we were first generations. Like a friend of mine, she is now a justice on the state Supreme Court of New York. Another one is a very well-known jazz musician. And then there was a family of a son and two daughters. He went on to become a doctor. His sister became an educator, and another went on to become a lawyer. And when I tell these stories, they're like, huh? What? The South Bronx? We weren't dodging bullets and smoking cigarettes in the alleyway. So I think it's important to tell your story and to not just shape it, but allow it to represent who you are. Because we cannot run from our past. We should be proud of our past. And by sharing it, it helps to crumble the bias that other people have. I mean, when I was talking to this one young woman who's white, and, I'm first generation American, blah, blah, blah. And then she said to me, I'm going to get this right. You must have learned how to speak proper English by watching television. Like, oh, what? I couldn't even speak English after she said that. And so, when we're going back to allyship, and if you, like, say you were a person next to me, you've heard that, what would you do? What would you say? Because sometimes we freeze. We don't know what to say. And we can break it down. And some of the things that you can say is just be short, declarative sentences. That's not cool. That's not right. That's all you need to say. Or you can make it about yourself and not about the person, because the person will become defensive. And you can say, well, my cousins are Black, and I can tell you they speak perfect English, and, they came from the South Bronx as well. It's these little things that we can do. This doesn't have to be complicated, but it's these little things that we can do that can chip away, and make the other person learn that what they say is incorrect.
Jennefer, I really very much appreciate what you're saying, because I think that there's also a perception for many people that they don't know what to say and they don't want to say the wrong thing, and their heart's really in the good place. But there's just, going back to the early part of our conversation, just a not knowing of what you don't know, right? And really, how do you ensure that you're doing the right thing and simultaneously doing right by others?
You know what? We're all going to make mistakes. I mean, none of us is a perfect person. And I don't have a problem with somebody who makes a mistake and their heart is in the right place because they're trying. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you learn more by making a mistake. And then once you know, and then you can go further with that knowledge. I would say don't be afraid of making a mistake, because if it comes from a truthful place within you, I will so absolutely appreciate it. And in a very gentle way, say, well, you know what? I didn't learn how to speak English from a television set. That person was just ignorant and annoying. But if somebody said that, and I knew the person, and I knew it was coming from a place of, not harm, not stereotypes, then I wouldn't feel anger. But if she said it again, then that person needs to be reevaluated.
So Jennefer, it's, you and I were talking before the show around Avenue Q, the Broadway musical. And there's a very special song in Avenue Q, which I think is called "We're All a Little Racist." Yes, that's what it's called. And it really gets to the heart of the matter of much of the conversation you and I have been having today, in the sense of, taking a risk, getting out of your comfort zone, and knowing that your heart's in the right place to do something, to say something, to feel okay with kind of the uneasiness of just not knowing, but putting forward good steps to try to shake the status quo, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So my question is, what makes a racist a racist? Like, at what moment in time is that line crossed where there's something else more insidious at work?
Okay. With implicit bias, when I have worked with people who have found out that they've had these hidden biases, these hidden prejudices, they are ashamed, they are astonished, and they want to change. A racist knows that they have this prejudice and they are proud of it. And it's part of their master status. Like, look at the Proud Boys marching in Charlottesville. Not one of them had a mask on. They are out there saying, yes, I'm a Proud Boy. Yes, I'm a white nationalist. So there. So the difference between implicit bias means that that person is not necessarily a racist. They have a bias of which they are unaware, and they want to change it once they are aware of it. The racist knows they have a prejudice, and they are going to live with it happily and move forward in it because they know they are right in their twisted thinking.
Jennefer, let's fast forward a year. What do you hope that we will have remembered about this time?
I said that we have to hold on to the small blessings. And, for most of our lives, we went about it not aware of what we have. My family came from Jamaica, and I'm first generation. So I've always felt betwixt and between. I am American, but I'm also West Indian. I can look at this, country a little bit removed, even though I love this country greatly. And I think that we never thought that we would be at a point where our democracy would be at risk. And I also think that the more simpler things that we have, like having food to eat, having a roof over our head, having income, having our health, are things that we just took for granted. Being with our friends and family, we don't need to go to Capri. We don't need to surf in Malibu, which, again, I want to do while I still have all my teeth. I do. But it's these little joys that have become precious nuggets because we don't have them anymore. So I think that a year from now, this virus will end. It will end. But what will happen is that the things that we took for granted, we will never take those little blessings for granted again.
Jennefer, do you feel like, because of exactly what you just said, that we have the capacity to get to know ourselves at a deeper, more individualistic level, because all the fanciness and all the bells and whistles of everything else in our life have largely been removed?
They haven't been removed, they've been stripped away, and this is the time when we really have to figure out what is important to us. Everybody, not everybody, but we would go out and buy, shoes and clothing and all of this, me included, and I think that we need to take a step back, and we are taking a step back and realizing what is the most important thing in my life. What are the things that I had that, they were nice, but they weren't needed. I'm not saying that we become monks and move into caves and eat gruel. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. But what I'm thinking is that in the next year, that there's going to be a much more simplified way of life, because we realize we've been going for a long time without, and do we need to go forward with? And so again, having those relationships, having food to eat, going to the supermarket that has shelves that are stocked with what we want, we will never take for granted these simple joys again. And we and ourselves are going to think twice about making high-level purchases. If you want to do it, you want to do it. But it's not going to be the same as it was before. I think that we're all going to live with a level of uncertainty. Like those who were born during the Depression, they never got over it. And a friend of mine told me that with her mother, who grew up during the Depression, and she's in a nursing home. The nurses keep finding plates of food under her bed because she remembers when she was hungry. And I was teasing her, and I said, well, when we're ready, to go in the nursing home, they'll probably find a roll of toilet paper under the bed. So, and the other thing is that we always have to laugh. At the end of the day, we have to laugh because, we can't cry all the time. So find something to at least smile at and lean in support on others.
Jennefer, I would agree with everything you just said except for the shoe part.
I'll never give that up.
I really miss wearing shoes, let's face it. But you're right on so many different levels. And I also feel like this is teaching us, to your point, around how to live more peacefully during times of extreme uncertainty, which I can't help but go back to think about something you were saying earlier in the conversation around getting out of your comfort zone. And so much about getting out of one's comfort zone involves taking some risks, being uncertain, feeling okay with the uncertainty, feeling okay kind of in that awkward space where life isn't necessarily a linear line. And I can't help but think, and my hope for the next year is that, we don't forget what happened this year anytime soon. And that, all of the ways in which it has impacted us culturally, socially, from a human rights perspective, from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective, that this is the start of something that's going to become even better in the future, because we've all gone through this and look like we know the pandemic has really brought to light the racial and class discrepancies in the United States yet again. I will say this, Jennefer, to something you said before about, what does it take for white America to wake up and to see it? We've always seen it.
Yes.
But I think that you have the power individually to step up and take some action toward creating something better that includes all human beings and invites them to dance at the party. And I'm hoping that this is a moment in time where that actually does happen, that there's actually positive change that comes from this, because there's been, let's not sugarcoat it, there's been a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of disbelief, a lot of denial, a lot of anger, frustration, and illness, honestly. And given the fact that we know that 59 million Americans have filed unemployment, and we know that women and people of color at the top of every industry that's been impacted, right? So I'm really hoping that this is that there are so many signs that we cannot ignore in the sense of what is really going to take to rebuild this country, both at that macro level, which makes it the United States of America, and at the individualistic level, in the sense of really, truly, how are we showing up and who do we want to become? And, what is the legacy that we're creating for ourselves and for our families and for our communities?
I totally agree. And again, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer because this has happened so much in my lifetime. I will tell you truthfully, I was shocked at the response of Mr. Floyd's murder. I did not think it would go beyond that, because if you recall, it was about 2 years ago when a police officer shot a man in his back when he was running away, and the video was there. And the police officer was eventually arrested, tried, and convicted. And there wasn't the same outrage that there was. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I temper it. And again, I don't want to be, well, we'll see what, I've seen it too many times in my life. So I would be happy to be completely wrong about this. And a year from now, if you say, Jennefer, I told you so, that it would get better, I would happily say, Jen, you were so right, and I was wrong. We'll see.
I hope you're wrong too. No, but I absolutely agree and understand everything you're saying as well, because it's, we've dealt with slavery and racism in this country since its founding days. And so it's a country that's built upon, I think, this myth of meritocracy, that if you work really hard, you will achieve, you will succeed. You'll have all these individual freedoms and all these individual rights. We're not a country that's founded on the collective betterment of the whole. And I think that there's still so much healing that needs to happen, just even from the early days of what the founding principles on which the U.S. was formed.
Mm-hmm. Again, the founding principles, but at the time there were slaves, and all men are created equal. Women weren't in that. And yes, there was the Emancipation Proclamation, but it took until 1965 for the Civil Rights Act to go and to have Black Americans the right to vote. So, again, we shall see what happens. But with every kick, there is a boost. And we are moving forward. And I will say this, that the changes that I have witnessed over this past year for social justice issues has been the greatest advancement in my 35 plus years working and my 50 plus years living on this planet. So there is hope. There is hope, and we have to hold on to it with both hands. And I'll say this: I do believe in the good of man, meaning men and women. I believe there is more good than bad, and that we will overcome this, because that is what my faith and belief is based on: goodness, and goodness will triumph.
Jennefer, thank you so much for hanging out today. This has been such an inspiring and honest conversation, and thank you for everything that you do each and every day in your work as well to inspire women to step into their full potential.
Jan, thank you for the opportunity, and I can say right back at you, Mayshad is doing wonderful work, and thank you for doing everything, for giving me this opportunity, and for others to have this platform to communicate. Thank you.
Jennefer, how do our viewers stay in contact with you?
Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn, and my first name is spelled funny. It's JenneFerWitter. And you can also follow me on Twitter. It's Jennefer at PBG. And on my website, which needs to be updated, is theborlandgroup.com, BORELAND.com.
Thank you, Jennefer. We'll see you again very, very, very soon.
I would like that. Thank you, Jan.
You're so welcome. Thanks, everyone, for watching our episode today. I'm Jan Mercer-Dahms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. Please make sure to leave a comment or a like in the video below, and we'll see you next time. Hello, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit the bell to receive notifications of all of our content.